Welcome to the Injection Connection, in-depth discussions with thought leaders and professionals in the polyurethane infrastructure repair industry.
Well, welcome everybody to yet another installment of the Injection Connection with Charlie Lerman, the Grout Geek. And real quick side note on this, I've gotten my moniker. There was this guy in the industry that I always thought was weird. His name was Captain Grout, and I thought it was silly that he'd run around with a moniker like that. And after 15 years of seeing, what it's done and how he's built a reputation on it, I ended up taking a moniker basically right after he retired from the industry. And that is Paul Layman, who I have right here with me. Paul, you have quite a diverse background, and I always refer to you as the Kevin Bacon of grouting, who seems to know everyone in the grout industry, at least have some kind of connection everywhere. So how did you get into this field? I mean, what's your background, Paul?
Well, I put myself through college as a cement finisher, and that kind of got me started in the construction phase, even though I had a teaching degree and a business major. Being a contractor on the weekends and a cement finisher, it kind of got me started in this business. And from there, kind of progressed. So I went from a phys ed teacher to a phys ed math teacher to an athletic director, became a principal of a small junior high. And I said, man, this isn't for me. I'm going back to regular teaching. And then I went back just to regular construction. And so I got into the construction field full-time, about in the middle of the 80s.
Gotcha.
And then I actually quit construction, went back to Maine where I grew up, and became the athletic director at my old high school where I graduated from.
And aren't you back at a school right now?
Yeah, I'm back in Maine. Yep, back
right.
here in good old New Gloucester.
So gone full circle there.
Yep, and then I go down there every once in a while, and I volunteer as their maintenance guy or help them out with different projects.
Paul is, for everybody out there, Paul's also very handy and doesn't sit still very well. So he's built cars, planes, all kinds of stuff since I've known him. So, and so let's see, I met you first when you joined Denif, and I think that was in the, around 2006, 2007?
Probably about that time, yeah.
Yeah, right around there or whatever. And we worked together for a few years there, and you were actually out here in the Seattle area.
Correct, yeah.
Right. And then from Denif, you were there, and I guess during the GCP transition, is that when you switched over to SpeedTech or shortly
Exactly,
thereafter?
yeah.
Right.
Yeah, we were at Denif for a few years and under the Grace moniker, and then most of us left and went back to SpeedTech.
Right. And for those out there that don't know, Grace, around the 2010, right around that time period, bought, Denif. And so there was a transition, and then Grace transitioned into GCP. So there's some history there with the product lines and stuff. But so Paul and I worked there together at Denif. And then, like you said, you went on to SpeedTech, which then merged into Alchemy SpeedTech. And then Paul and I briefly worked together again right before he retired. I came on to Alchemy SpeedTech about 3 years ago now. So
Correct, yeah.
Yeah. So Paul has a wealth of information and just knowledge of this industry and all the players and stuff like that. So we talked about how you got into it. What are, and I always like kind of opening with these kind of questions. What's your top maybe 1, 2, or 3 common mistakes you see from when people get into grouting?
I think they get over ambitious to say, well, we can fix this and we can fix that. Or they don't have quite the right knowledge, or, they don't recommend the right product. Like one of the projects we were on, they were going to recommend an acrylate. There we go, got that word out. And really, it wouldn't work well for an acrylate because the way it's designed, and it's about 50% water, where they really need to go with the GP kind of grout. So, and that's probably the thing. They overthink the job too much. It's a fairly simple process, but you don't want to overthink it. Just be straightforward and just take your normal steps and work from there, because the products really work well. And depending where you're at, and you can massage these products and change them in the field if you have to, but the simpler the process, the easier it is.
Right. No, and that's real important. And Jim likes to use a term. He calls it fail forward, and I like that. And then fail is not necessarily maybe the right exact term for grouting, but there's a lot of theory crafting where people say, oh, well, we know in a lab the grout does this, this, and this, and then they assume that they have lab conditions out there in the field, and you don't. You have field conditions. You don't know what's out there. So unless all the theory crafting you do, until you get out and actually pump some grout and see what you got going on, it's all guesswork at that point. I think that kind of ties into what you're saying there.
Absolutely. And then you've got the mechanics in the field, and you've got some smart guys in the field. And when you come upon a project, they may already figure that out. And so listen to the people in the field, because that's where I've learned a lot of my techniques and things. These guys in the field are smart people. They're intelligent people, and they can give you some really good guidance and little tricks that they've used you can pass those on. Don't be afraid to listen to them.
Right. And with that, with the guys out there, they're not just that they're smart, but they find it interesting to figure out what's going on. And it's like I've said, I see it as a game, and it's just very stimulating to get in there and see what's going on and figure out the problems and take care of those issues for
and exciting. And just because one guy does it one way, I have an old buddy, when we were grouting, he just liked to use those big old hand pumps, where I like to use electrical pump, the Graco types. But he liked his old hand pump there, and he was an excellent guy at that. And he could use a hydrophilic and a hydrophobic interchangeably. It didn't really make a difference because he knew how the products worked. And he was from the old school. So just because his methods were old school, they worked well. And so you don't throw those out, with the baby out with the bathwater.
There are many ways to grout the same structure, and I always tell people, unless you get out there and try a bunch of different ways, you're not going to know. And typically what happens is you find the first way that works for you and you stick with that. And I'm not saying to adjust that, but a lot of times there's still a couple other ways you could go about it. So when I get engineers say, well, what's the right way to do this? There's not there's wrong ways to do it, but the right way there's a lot of variables on that.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And these guys in the field, they know the conditions, they know the structure, because every dam, every mine, every tunnel, it's got its own idiosyncrasies. And these kids have been working down there, for a long time. They know how that structure works and what's going to do, and listen to them. And then you guys can come to a commonality of thoughts. Right.
So when I first, because I was in the industry a bit, I was a specialty waterproofer, but then when I started at Denise and then first met Paul, I was just baffled about how much this man had traveled and knew all the areas. So I'm very interested to see what you have for this next question here. So what are some of the most interesting jobs, or unique or interesting jobs that you've been on?
Well, kind of the neat ones are, we did the Hoover, we've been at Hoover Dam, we did the Seattle tunnels, but the job I did up in Canada on the tunnel, on the water system for the city of Vancouver, we were in shafts that went down 1,800 feet, 600 meters. Wow. And you get down there, it's pretty dark and cold. And when the pumps go off or the electric goes off, it gets pretty dark. But those are some of the neat projects. Then, of course, the projects we did up in Alaska, up above the Arctic Circle, we did a huge tank up there for CH2M Hill, and the tank was over 1 million gallon tank, and we had to stabilize the whole bottom underneath it over permafrost. And again, the mechanics we took up there, we had to fly everything up in an airplane, of course,
right,
and then unload it. And the mechanics up there, the kids that work, they were just smart as could be. They knew how that structure was going to work. And so, from Arizona, the Salt River projects down along the Colorado to all the way to the Arctic Circle. And then, being in mines and gold mines, and just every structure was different and neat. And it was a challenge. It was fun because you met a lot of neat people, and a lot of characters too, but they all had their little unique bend, and everybody had their little niche. And it was just a neat job. It really was. It wasn't work. It was every day you got a new adventure,
right?
And you had a problem.
And a lot of times when you talk to people in the grouting industry, and maybe I'm biased because that's where I've been, for the last 15, 16 years, but they're passionate about it. They find it interesting. It's not just the standard, I'm just going to apply a 2 mil coat of this and we move on to the next tank or something. It's always unique, and typically it's very unique situations. You brought up some remote sites there, and I found it interesting in my career where I've had engineers talk to me about a project, and I'm like, well, that sounds like you should do cementitious grouting. And they turn out not to be cementitious grouting just because of the remoteness. They can't get concrete out to a site or something like that. So I've seen urethane jobs that just because of, mobilization, they use the chemical grout. So it's not the most cost effective when you compare materials, but when you compare mobilization, then the chemical grout comes in.
Well, like one time we were out on the, we had to go out the Aleutians, and we put, I think, about 15, 20 pails of grout in the airplane, and then we put in another 15 pails of fuel. So
right.
We had to put the fuel in the airplane too, because we got out on the islands, and they had to get themselves back. So we had the grout and the fuel, both. The plane had to carry both of us out there.
That is so cool.
When we got out there, the guys pull out the 15 pails of fuel and start fueling the airplane up so they can get back and leave us with our grout there on the Aleutians. It was just neat stuff like that, and the people you meet out there.
Right. Yeah, very much so. That's awesome.
And all the equipment we put in big trunks and carried all our equipment. What we didn't take with us, we weren't going to find at the local hardware store because there weren't none for 1,000 miles.
No, and that is real important, and specifically there. But even when you're, just a couple miles in a tunnel, and just the 20 minutes to get back out to get that screwdriver your team forgot. So it's important to make those lists and know what you need to have.
Yeah, we were doing a mine up in Alaska, and the grout started getting away from us. And luckily, we were down 2 miles in the mine, but luckily we had enough catalyst and cleaning agent that we could save the grout and the pump, because otherwise we would never had time to take it out to the entrance and fix it up, and we'd lost the pump, and we're 100 miles, 200 miles from the closest civilization. So we'd have been toasted up there.
Right.
But again, those are things you just kind of learn after the years of doing this stuff.
Yep, indeed. So I had mentioned that Paul was with Denif when it was bought and stuff like that. So I just on the last episode I was talking to John Zabel, and I'm going to ask you the same question there. Do you have an opinion about the small grout manufacturers being bought by these major companies like Grace or Prime being bought by RPM or any of that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I really do, because when we were at when it was just Denif, there was 12 of us guys nationwide, and we pretty well wrote the book. We didn't have to have a lot of bureaucracy telling us what to do and when to do it and how to do it and what our sales were going to be. The small companies, they understand the customer, because the customer is king. The big companies, they don't care about the customer. All they care is about that bottom line for that next week's, value added or the next week's stock market price. They don't care anything about the product or the customer. It's all just what money they can stuff in their pockets. And I think that they lose the quality of service too, because the little guy is just as important as the big guy, because the little guy is the guy that's going to be out there and tell what a unique situation that they fix with the grout, where the big companies don't care at all. I just, once they go to the big company, and then in my opinion, the quality of product suffers because they can ship it around to plants all over. They don't have that man in the shop. Like when we were at Denif, they had a guy in the shop that he could smell the difference. He knew that product inside out, when to add the right products. And when you get the big company, all they go is buy a formula, and it's like a recipe, and they don't know all the nuances and the idiosyncrasies of that product. And it's sad because they lose the quality and the performance, in my opinion.
Right. No, that is very well stated. And I agree with that, grouting is very nuanced and specialized. So yeah. Thank you. Let's see. So, what's another question I'd like to ask is, what's the biggest failure or problems you've had on a job?
I don't know. We did that big building in San Francisco where the building is actually leaning now, and that was unique because the biggest problem there was one time the guys were drilling in and they hit a cable, and luckily they didn't blow them. It was a 10,000 watt box or wattage thing. And luckily they weren't standing on the pump or with the pump when it hit the cable. Those are things you've got to be careful with. And safety is incredible down there because you could be out, in a mine a mile back or down a shaft, and if something goes wrong, you can't get out quick and you're in the mud and the muck up to your knees. One job we were down a mile in a tunnel, and one of the gates broke, and it was in a dam, and the water went from our boots up to our knees. Again, so those are things you got to really be cognizant of and have all your ducks in a row. So, to have yourself ready for any emergency that could come up or, contingency.
Right. No, and it is, especially, when you're confined spaces, like you said, that they offer unique challenges on top of what you normally run into anyway. So.
Exactly.
Right. All right. Let's see. What have been some of the challenges? Because I know you've worked on a lot of dams and large projects like that. Have you specifically to say the Corps of Engineers or the Bureau of Rec? What kind of challenges have you had personally with dealing with them?
The biggest problem I found out with both those organizations, they had people that sometimes overthought the project. And then you'd spend, 6-8 months getting the project ready and designing it and make sure you had all your ducks in a row. And you get ready for the project, and all of a sudden, oh, we're out of budget this year. Oh, we can't do it this year. Just like the big job up there in California, I can't think of the name of where the dam blew out. Up there, I think it was. Pardon?
No, I remember what you're talking about. Can't.
Yeah, and we showed them how to fix that problem. It was just up there by Chico. I can't think of the name offhand, but anyway, we'd showed them how to fix that problem a couple of years before that, and given them some really good ideas. And they couldn't afford it. And then when the whole structure blew out, the spillways blew out, they spent billions of dollars, and when they could have, if they hadn't been so cheap in the first place and wasn't in their budget for this week or that week, or they changed their mind the last second. And it's kind of frustrating because you've done all this due diligence, you lay out your scheme, you get all your ducks in a row, then all of a sudden the last minute they say, oh no, we're not going to do it. And so you really laid everything out already.
Yeah, and with you bringing that up, I feel that they understand that they also have that issue. I've seen projects come out from, or I guess initiatives where they're trying to speed up and streamline the process because it can be very slow and long to deal with them. So yeah, no, thank you very much. So do you have a personal favorite grout? Not necessarily by name, but a type of grout, hydrophilic, flexible, or just anything that you like to go towards?
Well, yes, yeah, the old hydrophilics, phobics, they're probably the best because you can change them around depending on the temperatures and things of that nature. And you can. Well, the thing is, and you can even mix them, the hydrophobics and hydrophilics. We've done that in the field by mistake, and boy, they were the cat's meow at that time. They're real tickets. So just the old standard grouts work well. And and again, it goes back to the manufacturer. If you're using a small, manufacturer like we were at Denif or at Alchemy Speed Tech, the old products, those are just quality products, and you could do a lot and change them in the field. So you feel very comfortable. So if you got in a situation where you needed a little faster reaction, you could do it. With the newer grouts, I've been out of the business now for 3 or 4 years, but again, the old grouts had a lot of flexibility, and you could actually mix and match different products that weren't in the books. You could do some pretty neat stuff with them and stop some pretty good holes. And then some situations, if you're down below in a dam, it's not a bad thing if you can't get it, walk away for a day or two and think about it, and go reevaluate. Don't just sit there and waste gallon after gallon after gallon when it's not working. There's other ways to do it.
Right. So one of the issues I've seen, and actually I struggle with some, is using chemical grouts in dry conditions. So say like you're down in Arizona, Southern California, and they know they have a leak, but it only leaks, once or twice a year or something like that, or just during a rain. And so they're typically grouting when it's dry.
Right.
Do you have any suggestions on how to kind of overcome those kind of hurdles?
Yeah, a lot of times, we try to put you to the rainy season, but if you can't, then you use copious amounts of water to get that structure saturated. You want that structure, you want the concrete around it, you want it, you know, surface saturated, really wet in there. If you're doing an irrigation canal, again, you get that surface wet. If you have to puddle it for a while, get that structure really wet, because then the grout really adheres and chases it to its maximum extent, and it can really lock itself in. Because if you don't do it right, it's just going to shrink away, or it's not going to bond well. And then when it's really needed, it may just blow itself out or leak around and finally break down and not work.
Right, right. Well, one last question. Oh, go. What's that?
I said, so lots of water is your friend.
Yes, yes, indeed. I like to give the analogy to people that if I hired you to come into my house and paint a room, and when you showed up to paint it, I turned all the lights off and closed the doors, it was pitch black in there, you could still paint the walls, but it probably is not going to look good when we turn the lights back on. And I look at it the same way with waterproofing. If the water's not there, you don't know where you're going to move that leak to or whatnot. So adding copious amounts of water and stuff is very important.
That's very important, yeah, because you may stop it here, but then when the water comes up, it's going to find a hole somewhere else that you didn't grout because it wasn't wet. Yeah, absolutely.
Right. So I have to ask, and I'm not sure if I've just gotten old enough where I don't remember, if I've never asked you, how did you get the moniker Captain Grout?
Well, originally it was my brother. He was the original Captain Grout, and we were in the cementous grouting, you know, high strength grout. And then when my brother got out of the business, I said, you know, it probably wouldn't be a bad title for me. It's kind of a goofy name, but people remember me. I don't care if they forget me for anything, but they remember that goofy little fat guy with the name Captain Grout. It's going to work. So I grabbed that moniker, and it worked for the last 40 years.
It does indeed. And still to this day, I travel around like, yeah, you know, this guy was out here training us. I don't remember his name. It's Captain Grout. And I was like, all right, that's it. I'm taking the Grout Geek because, well, you know, as you know, I've always been a geek. So, you know.
You're a techie guy. You're a smart guy.
So, well, Paul, you know, it's been excellent kind of following you around through the industry, you know, a little bit behind you and seeing, as I've grown up in the industry, you've always been part of it. So I'm honored to be able to hear and talk to you, be here and talk to you about it. So thank you very much. And I guess that's another session of our Injection Connection with Alchemy Speed Tech, Charlie Lerman.
Well,
Paul Layman was our guest.
If you need a grout guy in Maine, you just let us know. We'll be glad to help you.
That's it. Paul has retired, but he's still is active, does consulting, and comes out on anything. So seriously, anybody who needs help with this, Paul's a good guy out in the area there. So, well, thank you, Paul.